All right, this is our Google Doc on E. Cummings. He was born in Cambridge, Massachusetts in 1894, and he died in 1962. His father was a Congregationalist minister and a teacher at Harvard. In the beginning of Cummings' writing career, he wrote in intricate stanza patterns that are reminiscent of the Pre-Raphaelite and the metaphysical writers. However, as he began to hone his craft, he began to innovate with the style and technique of his poetry. He was a painter as well as a poet. And let's go back. If you'll notice this painting right here, this was painted by him. And this painting to your right was also painted by him. But in his attempt to reshape poetry, he wished to be widely acceptable. So he didn't believe in using high levels of diction. He believed that the common man should have access to his poetry, to the meanings. In 1950s, he did a tour of the colleges where he would go around and read his poetry to the students, and he was quite popular. They enjoyed his tricks of verse and vocabulary and his very earthy poetry, because we're moving into the 60s where people started to be a bit more open to different ideas. Cummings' verse is characterized by common speech and attention to the visual form of the poem. This basically means that it was important to him, the visual aspect of the poem, that it should look a particular way on the page. So not only should it be pleasing to the ear, but it should also be pleasing to the eye. He experimented with capitalization or complete lack of it, punctuation, line breaks, hyphenation, the shape of the verse, the shape that the poem made on the page was important to him. And to express his sense that life was always in process, he often wrote untitled poems without beginnings or endings, and a lot of times there are fragmentary lines within his poems. There is always humor in his poetry, and his outrage at cruelty and exploitation is balanced with gusto and celebration of the body. And this, perhaps to your right, is my very favorite Cummings painting. I really enjoy the colors, and then of course he's got his signature hat down in the corner. So, at this point I want you to read the poem in just, and of course we have this sad little lame balloon man. And you have your children and they're playing, they're jump roping, they're hopscotching, they're just having a lovely time, and there's this little man lurking in the corners, and he's described as being goat-footed. So anytime something is described as goat-footed, we typically go straight to Pan the Satyr. And Pan was the god of the wild hunting and companion of the nymphs. So he had a horde of ladies that followed him around in the woods. But this character is, because he is the god of nature and natural settings, it's also a sign for us as the readers of In Just to start thinking that perhaps the balloon man is symbolic of something. So we have mention of spring, and then we have the goat-footed balloon man. So really, basically, what this poem is about the seasons of life. These children are playing, they're enjoying their childhood, but lurking from the corner is Pan. The natural progression of time, that these children are going to age, that they are going to enter puberty, that they are going to enter their adolescence, and they will enter a new season of their life. So there are three main school thoughts on the poem In Just. The first is from Kidder and Kennedy, and they view this poem as optimistic. They believe that it's a poem depicting a world of childlike innocence and play, and through the symbol of the lame balloon man who's goat-footed and could also be referenced, could be a reference to Pan, that he's representative of the first hints of sexual maturity and how that hovers and it's veiled in the air as these children play. The second school of thought is Ian Landless, and his is a post-structuralist critique. The post-structuralists believed that when you read a poem, the reader will automatically replace the author. I think a lot of times when we read poetry, we tend to think that if the poem is about a loved one, the author is speaking about somebody that they love. Well, in a post-structuralist critique, the reader will replace the author. So if you're reading a love poem, then the reader will insert somebody that perhaps they have loved and lost, and that poem will become a personal experience for them. So Landless believed that Kidder and Kennedy, because they emphasize so strongly on the children's innocence, that they marginalize the strangeness of the balloon man. Landless believes that the balloon man is a huge symbol in this poem, and that Kidder and Kennedy tend to dismiss it. Now, Landless, the crux of his argument lies in the capitalization of the J in just. He believes that this signals the ambiguity and that is the entire point of the poem. Also, it tends to direct the reader to treat the definitions, the allusions, and the symbols with suspicion. I think a lot of times, and I've noticed in the discussion, that a lot of you are kind of creeped out by the balloon man. And I think we're meant to be suspicious of him. Is he good? Is he bad? Is he evil? Why is he watching these children? There are a lot of questions. And then third, we have the traditionalist view. And I think this is the one that most of us, I know in my undergrad, this is the one that I was taught. But the traditionalists believe that Cummings' poem is holistic. It is inclusive of the light of childhood and spring, as well as the sexually more complex, darker season of maturity to come. That the goat-footed, earth-connected pan figure includes all of our seasons of life. And traditionalists believe the poem oscillates between its extremes of innocent center, which will be our children, and the foreboding satyr, balloon man, pan. So this oscillation will allow the readers to embrace the human experience of growing up while simultaneously celebrating both the light and dark aspects of each season of our life. So I think that's pretty interesting. And I hope that helps you guys understand the poem a little more. And then our very last portrait is a self-portrait from E.E. Cummings. I think he looks like Bruce Willis here, but hey, you decide.